Hello and welcome to this edition of WideOrbit's Widen Your World. This is the second video in our series for setting up and configuring group voice tracking. Today we will be covering the configuration within Central Server. We will cover preliminary information to gather ahead of time, connection to a friendship server, category creation, adding the remote families, creating the voice tracking groups, setting distribution override rules, and lastly, the auto approval rules. To start with, there's going to be some basic information you're going to want to have on hand. You're going to want to know the name and IP address of the friendship server that is going to be used to connect the markets for group voice tracking. You are going to want to make note of each of the market names as they're configured in friendship server. Within each market, you're going to need to know the radio station names of each radio station as they're configured in the local market's central server. Also make note of the unique category each station will be using for group voice tracking for each station. When making note of names, it's important to note the exact spelling and capitalization for the family names and radio station names. As we configure these into groups, these names must be exact. Now that we have all of that information on hand, let's take a look at your local market's connection to the friendship server. Start by logging onto the configuration page of your central server. Scroll down the options on the left to System Heading. The link for friendships is right below. At the top of the page, your local market's family information will be displayed. Going to the lower section of the page, the associated friendship servers will be listed. The assumption at this point is that all markets have already been connected to the friendship server. Click on Link on the Connected Friendship Server line. This will bring you to the Friendship Server Configuration login. Once connected to the Friendship Server Configuration page, scroll down to the bottom of the page to see the list of families that have been connected. Start by clicking on your local family name. Here, we'll want to make sure that search, upload, and download privileges between your local market and all other families associated with group voice tracking are checked. When complete, click on Save Privileges, then back to return to the family list. Repeat this process for each family that will be associated with the group voice tracking. Now that we have the friendship server details set, let's make sure that we have all of the necessary categories in place. A couple of reminders when creating categories. Categories for group voice tracking must be unique within the market and unique across all families. For a market to record a group voice track locally, the categories from each of the markets associated with the group must be present on the local central server. And if the decision was made to utilize hub markets for the groups, the hub market will need to have all of the categories configured. All other markets will only need to have their local category configured. Let's begin by creating the category used for group voice tracking in our local market. Start by logging onto the Central Server Configuration page. Along the left side of the page, under the Configuration heading, click on the Categories link. Click on the Add Category link at the top of the page. For the name, enter the 3-character category you would like to create. In our example, we'll use R01. The server path should be the UNC address to your central server's audio folder, and end with the same category name entered above. For the description, enter in a meaningful category name. For example, GVT to designate this as a group voice track, Rock to identify the group, and Detroit to specify the market this is being tracked for. Audio type should be set to unfadable for all voice track categories, and media type set to unspecified. Click Save. Repeat this process for each of the categories that you need to create for your local market. With categories created, look along the left side for the User Profile link and click on that. Select the user profile or profiles that will be used for group voice tracking. Click on the Inventory tab, then search for the categories you have just created. Make sure that each of the user profiles that are associated with group voice tracking have access to these newly created categories. With user permissions in place along the left side of the screen, click on the Radio Stations link. Start by clicking on the radio station where you will be doing the group voice tracking. Click on the Categories tab and put a check in the box for each of the categories added for this group. Scroll to the bottom of the page and click Save. This will bring us to the initial radio stations page. Repeat this process for each of the radio stations that categories have been created for. With categories added and permissions granted, it's time to add our remote radio stations to the configuration. On the radio stations page, click on the link for Add Remote Radio Station Reference. For the station name, enter the name of the remote radio station exactly as it appears on the central server for that market. For the remote family name, enter the family name exactly as it appears in the Friendship Server family list. Lastly, for the voice track category, select the category that will be used for the remote station's voice tracks for this group. Then click Save. Repeat this process for each of the remote stations that will be participating in the group voice tracking. With all of the remote stations added to the server configuration, it's time to start to create the groups. From the radio station configuration, click on the Add Radio Station Group link. For the station group name, enter the name that will be used for this group of voice trackers. Make note of the name used exactly as you have it spelled out. This information will be needed for scheduling of group voice tracks, and if multiple markets are going to be recording the group voice tracks, this name will need to match exactly across all market configurations. Click on Save. At this point, you will be presented with a screen where you will be able to select the local and remote stations that are going to be part of the group. Start by selecting your local station. As you click on it, the station will move to the left, indicating that it has been added to the group. Repeat this process for each of the stations that are going to be associated. Click on Save when done. You'll be returned back to the radio station configuration page. At the bottom, you will see the group you have just created and a display of all the radio stations associated with it. The next part of the process will be to create distribution override rules. This is a safeguard to ensure that any of the tracks that get recorded to these categories automatically get sent to the proper station. From the central server configuration page, scroll down the list on the left to the distribution link. From the drop-down menu, start with the category for your local market that you created earlier. Then click Create Rule. You will be presented with a list of stations and markets that could get carts from this category. Click on the radio box for each station and market that should receive these tracks under the Always column. For the rest of the stations and markets, set the Never radio box. This process ensures that the tracks only get delivered to the stations and markets that are participating in the group voice tracking. The final part of the central server configuration will be to set the auto approval rules for the different families. From the central server configuration page, scroll along the left side of the screen. At the bottom of the configuration section, you will find a link for auto approval. Under the target category, use the drop-down menu to select your local group voice track category, then click on Create Rule. For the family name, enter in the family of the market that will be doing the recording of the group voice tracks. Enter this name exactly as it appears in the Friendship Server family list. For the source category, enter in the category name. For the start and end range, enter in 0000 for the start and ZZZZ for the end. This will approve any cart number combination that can be created. Under the rule actions, it is best to leave encoding, sample rate, and normalization in the default settings. For auto approval action, use the drop-down and select Distribute. For override action, use the drop-down menu and choose Override. Then lastly, select the station these tracks will be sent to, then save the rule. Repeat these steps for each market voice tracks will be recorded in, and for each category voice tracks will be sent to. As you may have noticed when creating auto approval rules, it is possible to use the All setting when creating rules for items coming in from a specific market. Using the setting is acceptable, however, keep in mind that through Friendship Server, files from any category can be shared, and setting this rule would allow for changes and edits on any cart, not just voice tracks, to be published to your local market. With this, your central server configuration for group voice tracking is complete. In our next video, we'll discuss the scheduling and recording of group voice tracks. If you have any questions regarding this video, please reach out to our support team at ras@wideorbit.com or give us a call at 415-675-6775 option 4.